Okay. So for years, for the past few years, 2.5, 3 years, I have had a little voice in the inside of my head saying, share your story, share your story, share your story. And I have genuinely wanted to, but genuinely didn't know the right format. I've explored writing a blog. I've explored recording a podcast. I've explored a lot of different ways that I could share my story. And it just boiled down to surveying the last 15 plus years of my career as a professional dancer, assistant choreographer, movement coach, and realizing that the format wasn't as important as the actual sharing itself. And it's taken on a few different it's looked different each time I've explored, like, well, how would I share my story? Like, why would I share my story? And recently it has become very clear to me that this is a two-way conversation. Um, First and foremost, this to me feels like the last bit of healing that I need to do, that expressing some of the things that I've gone through, that I've experienced while in the industry of professional dance. The way to kind of seal the chapter, seal the era of what it was for the last 15 plus years, is me getting it out. And so, first and foremost, this is a way for me to honor the inner voice, honor my higher self that knows that expressing myself this way is what's necessary in order to achieve a lot of the things that I know I'm going to achieve and a lot of the changes I know are coming this year. The other side is I hope that my story serves as a resource for other dancers that want to perform at a high level, that want to perform in big jobs, big tours, big projects, and that if they face any similar obstacles that I have, that they have somewhere to point and go, well, this is what happened to him, and I don't want that to happen to me. So what happened there, and how do I avoid that? There's been opportunities to share my story on all kinds of media platforms. 2.5 years ago, I had Rolling Stone, Billboard, Variety, USA Today, all in my DMs, all in my email inbox. And although there were moments where it was tempting, Page Six was also one of them. Although it was tempting, I was too in the emotionality of everything to take that as an opportunity to share my story. It also just didn't feel right that it was like vultures preying on my pain and on experiences that they knew nothing about really. And ultimately I felt like you're just going to turn something I say as an emotional reaction or as an emotional response and turn it into a clickbait headline that has nothing to do with the actual story itself. And that wasn't what I wanted. That wasn't it just didn't align with who I am, and just fundamentally, like, I'm not going to turn to you in order to achieve something. My story is very personal. My story is very layered. It's complicated. Well, it's felt complicated. And the more and more time that has passed, and the more I have kind of been able to disconnect from a lot of the people in my story, the more I look in hindsight, the more that I see my experiences through my boyfriend's eyes, the more that I see my story in new friendships and looking at it and seeing it through their eyes and seeing their reactions to certain things, I've really realized while doing simultaneously a lot of deep inner work and processing while also learning how to run a business, because I started my own business and now it's the source of stability, and I've had to learn how the hell do you learn how do you run a successful business. So all this has been happening simultaneously, and then there's been these moments of upset and opportunity. We want to know, we want to share your story, and it just wasn't right. It wasn't the right timing, and ultimately it wasn't something that I could control. And if you're into astrology like I am, as a Virgo, I'm gonna want to be able to control my own story. There was no one else to tell it other than me at this point. So to just jump into the main point, there's a lot of elements, and I'm gonna just focus on one. And I get the feeling this is gonna take a series of videos to really capture the magnitude or all the various components at play. But to jump right in, when I was on my first tour, which was the Monster Ball, end of 2009 through mid 2011, in the first year, while we were touring in Europe, while I was on stage, I believe I was in Germany or France, I had an experience on stage where my left ear, I just, all of a sudden, it sounded like the crowd was in my ear like the whole time. Now, we didn't have in-ears at this time, so it was just raw ears in all these arenas, and I was like, I feel like something is like, I feel like it also sounded like when the show was over or whatever, it was like, it sounds like someone's holding a seashell up to my ear, and I don't get what's happening. So I went to talk to management. They brought in a doctor, and it was just like, oh, you've got some fluid in your ear, like, here's some medication. Okay, cool. Fluid cleared, but the noise was still in my ear, and so, can I see another doctor? Okay. But these are what we call rock docs in the touring world. These are just doctors that are designed to just do whatever they can to like get you on stage so you can perform that night. We didn't have any understudies. So it was one of these things where it was like, no, something's not right. And so I started asking if I could see a specialist, and wasn't given that opportunity for several weeks, and was saying like, there is no more fluid in here, there is no other symptoms, there's nothing going on, something's not right. And one of my tour friends at the time, Molly, was really an advocate for me at that time to like, no, he needs to see somebody. So she actually went to someone else in production, like a production manager, and said, hey, it's been several weeks and he's just not been given the opportunity to see a specialist. There's something wrong with his ear. Now, at that time, I could already tell that I was having difficulty hearing. And that was like the big thing for me, was like, I need to see a specialist because something's not right. Like, I can't, like, it sounds like a seashell is in my ear and I'm having difficulty hearing. So at this point, 6 weeks from the onset had passed. We were now back touring in the States, and I believe we were in Dallas or Houston. And so this production designer helped book me an appointment at an ear, nose, and throat doctor in either Dallas or Houston. I'm almost positive it was Dallas. And I found out that I had lost 70% of hearing in my left ear, and that it was permanent. And that when treated in the first 2 weeks of the onset, that it can be reversed by giving a direct shot of steroids into my ear. But we were 6 weeks, and that it was too late. So I would have to live the rest of my life with 30% of hearing in my left ear and full hearing in my right ear. So to say that I was devastated and, devastated is an understatement. And where this story is, like, where the point of this story, it's not, boo-hoo, Graham lost 70% of his hearing in one ear. It's more the things that happened and didn't happen next. So there's so many things that I could say, and I want to be very clear and I want to be very concise. So I'm gonna try and avoid emotion and just kind of stick to my experience. That's my goal, because this doesn't need to be a sob story about losing my hearing. It's more so, like I said, the healing part of this story, healing part of sharing my story, and for someone else to learn from. When I talked to leadership at that time, which at that time we're talking about Richie Jackson as the assistant choreographer, and we're talking about Lorianne Gibson as the lead choreographer. Now, at this time, Richie and I were like best friends. I considered him a brother. I trusted him with everything, and it was through him that I met Lorianne, and how I even came into the picture. So I called him and mentioned what was going on, and he told me that he wasn't going to tell Lorianne what happened, because if so, I would be fired. And so, being 24 at the time, I believe I was 24, being 24, and my first professional, like big time, high profile professional experience, I trusted that what my friend was telling me was in my best interest. And so I don't even think to this day Lorianne knows that this took place. So then I am working with tour management to get me in-ears so that I can protect the hearing that I do have in my right ear and the remaining hearing I have in my left ear. And, it's crazy, this part of the story, because tour director at that time is actually no longer living. But I remember losing my SHIT because when we were looking at in-ear options, he just said, get whatever's cheapest. And I went AWOL. So needless to say, I got a nicer pair of in-ears. But then, while on a break from tour, and this is like after sharing with my family and sharing with my friends, everyone was encouraging me to go for workers' compensation. And so I said, okay, I'll do that. And so I had to get an MRI, and I had to go to an ENT here in LA, and I went through this whole rigmarole and filed for workers' compensation through Live Nation. I was immediately denied and immediately intimidated with 7 lawyers sending letters, making phone calls that I eventually just stopped answering, because it was it was a lot. And I was also just upset that, and I didn't understand how I could be denied workers' compensation when the writing it was all there. The elements were all there. On tour, on stage, when this happened, negligence in terms of like seeing a specialist sooner rather than 6 weeks later, all the elements combined was just like, I don't understand. So I called my friend, but also the assistant choreographer, called Richy and said, like, this, I don't know what to do. Like, I've been denied workers' compensation. I have a lifelong condition now, and I don't understand what to do. And he said, if you make a big deal about this, you're going to be fired. And just put it on my lap to say, like, if you want to make this a big deal, you're going to be let go. And if you don't, then maybe you'll keep going. And so, obviously, 24-year-old me said, okay, I won't make this a big deal, I guess. And I'll just live with it so that I can continue pursuing my dream. And because at that point, I'd only done one tour. And we were still going. And so for the remainder of the Monster Ball, Born This Way Ball, Art Pop Promo, Art Rave Tour, Super Bowl, Coachella, Joanne, Enigma, first part of Chromatica pre-pandemic, I just learned to live with this condition while being teased about not being able to hear all the time, while in rehearsals, while on stage, happened every single time, because we'd wear in-ears. You know, the next tour, we all got in-ears, but when I had my in-ears in, I couldn't take one out to be able to hear my other cast members on stage, so it was hard for me to be able to communicate with everyone and understand what was going on. I would have to take the right ear one out, leave the left ear one, but I could barely hear in the left ear anyway. So it was really just this long period of time where, although achieving like amazing things, I don't want it to make, I don't want this to sound like a full-blown sob story, because at the same time I was achieving great things. Super Bowl was one of like my career highlights. Was it the 2013 VMAs? Like the applause performance was one of my like first times really being seen as a dancer, and it was amazing. But looking back, reflecting back on all of it, I didn't realize how much shit was really messed up in terms of the day-to-day experience of being called Alma from Sister Act. You know, the old lady that plays the piano that can't hear anything. Being told to turn my battery up, and like, because she can't hear, and Whoopi Goldberg's character is telling her to turn her hearing aid up. Having some of my castmates stomp their feet and saying, Alma, check your battery, when they couldn't get my attention and when I didn't hear them. You understand? It's like the macro is already messed up. The big picture of losing my hearing and no one, leadership failing was already big enough. To have day-to-day experiences with people that I was calling my friends, and that felt like friends, but like, what messed up friends make fun of an injury and a lifelong condition? You know what I'm saying? Like, these are the things. And at this point, like when we get all the way through 2020, getting all the way through there, nothing was ever shared with the top of the heap, the top level. Gaga herself was never told, this is my understanding, was never told that this happened. And it wasn't like it was just easy access, right? You can't just like go up to the, and it also wasn't like it's not how you're trained as a professional dancer to be like, oh, I'm going to bypass security and management and glam, and I'm just going to bypass everybody and be like, hey, can I talk to you for a second? Not really how that went, but also operating under the notion that if I make this a big deal, if I do that, then I'm going to be fired. Oh, Lord, it's like when I say it out loud and talk about the healing and you just hear it, like, and I've been having this experience in personal relationships, but to say it out loud and to record it and all of this, like, it's so obviously wrong and so horrible that it's like, how on earth is this reality? But it is what it is. In 2021, Richy and I our friendship came to an explosive end. And it was all, we both have very different reasons for why this friendship needed to end. Well, that's a conversation for another time. But our friendship came to an end September of 2021. It was explosive. It was nasty. And I knew that in one conversation, our 15 plus year relationship, personal and professional, was over. So I already knew. I knew September 2021 that moving forward, I was not going to be invited back to any kind of Gaga thing, just anything, because I was also his assistant at that time. So I just knew, like, all right, this is not a thing. So to later find out that he went on page 6 to say that we were trying to save face was like, yo, buddy, nobody's trying to save face, but do you? But so when Chromatica became a thing of conversation and the dancers were experiencing everything they were from the audition process through everything that those dancers went through, whatever, I was just hearing on the sidelines because some people didn't even know that Richy and I split. So I was getting all kinds of like, can you explain to me like what's happening? It's like, good luck, because it's never going to make sense. But by the time myself, Sloan, and Kevin came to Instagram to support Montana and just share our view of leadership at that time, there was no way that I could say all of this in that moment. I just was just like, no, I want to save my girl. Like, I want to support her. I don't want her to be just the only one to be out there saying that, yo, this wasn't always a great experience. That's a blanket statement, just saying the very minimal, just about all of that. But at that time, that's when the varieties, the Rolling Stones, the Billboards, the USA Todays, the Page Sixes, like all the things, that's when they all came out to us, reached out, and share your story, and it just wasn't time. But after that, Gaga's management reached out and said, we would like to, have one-on-one conversations to understand where you're coming from and what's happening. So I relived 6.5 pages worth of negative experiences, negative upsets with Gaga's manager. And number one was my ear and how it all transpired, what I was told, because you have to know now that her manager now is different than her management was back then. So I shared 6.5 pages. I relived 6.5 pages of negative experiences on and away from all work with Gaga. To just give a character profile. And in that sharing, imagined that at least my ear would be something that was shared. And I can't say that it was or that it wasn't. But all I do know is that in my experience after sharing, nothing happened. Nothing friggin' happened. And it is a reminder, and this was what one of my best mentor in as a dancer always said to me, and this is before I went on tour, and this is someone who's been in the industry since like the 60s and the 70s. And she said, and I'm quoting here, but the diva's not your friend. And I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't share that belief. And because I did have major moments of connection, I did feel like there was companionship. I did feel like there was a level of friendship, albeit we are in a professional environment, and I am someone who does have pretty damn strict boundaries of like, there's personal and there's professional. I mean, I've had to live that way and function that way because my career has been working with friends for the most part. So it all came full circle for me that business is always going to be business, because as a CEO of my own company now, you know, am I obligated to like make a phone call? Am I obligated to show up in any capacity based on a story or an event like my ear from 12 years ago? Or 10, I guess, at that point. 10, 11. I don't know. Do I, as a human being, feel like the first thing I'm going to do is pick up the phone? Yeah, I do. Because that's character. But nothing happened. And it was one of those moments that led me here, doing this conversation right now, sharing this reliving of everything. It was already happening in my personal relationships, right? Because most of my friendships now, my partner included, these are new relationships. These are post-pandemic relationships. So sharing my history, sharing like when you get to know somebody, I've already been like, wait, why is this like a lot darker? Why does it feel more dark than it does all the light, all the great things, all the accomplishments, all the glitz and all the glam and all the travel, and I mean all of that is still there, and those are moments that I did enjoy. But it was like, damn, when I really think about my like day-to-day experience, kind of just like muffling a lifelong freaking condition because I was told if I made it a big deal, I would be fired. Light bulb moment of just like, oh, well, no wonder you feel creatively stunted. No wonder you feel like your artistry is blocked in a certain way. There is a big, just dark nugget of trauma inside that needs to come out. And this is something I teach as an astrologer to my clients. You can't keep it in. And in reflecting on my era of a dancer in this way, the only way out of it is through it. And so that's what this is about, right? One, a vehicle for healing, and that is very personal to me, and why I am doing this like this. And also, two, so that I'm not some dancer that like faded in the background that could have helped someone else who might experience an obstacle similar to mine, or a condition, or something that happens and it is not taken care of. Because what you don't understand, potentially, you might not understand, we are not protected with unions on tour. I think there's been one or two tours that had union representation. It's an ongoing effort in the dance industry. But there's no HR. There is no one to go to say that is fully pulled out of and totally objective, and for you to just go, hey, I'm experiencing issues with my hearing, and I don't have access, or I'm being denied access to see a specialist to get it looked at. I'm only getting rock docs that are just like, oh, they look in there, they're like, okay, well, here, take this little antibiotic and, go perform. That's the role. These are doctors that would just come with shots of B12 and just like give you a shot in the ass and boom. There's your energy for the night, which is all good and well and helpful. But when you're talking about a bigger condition, it's a big deal. And as someone who has always worked in corporate jobs and freelance gigs for, bigger companies, the basic format is HR is where you go when you have some kind of complaint or some kind of issue and you need their objectivity. There wasn't that. We had the choreographers, and for me, that was Richy. And, there was a dead stop there, but does he carry the full burden of what happened to me? No, he wasn't even on the road at that time, but I was not given, it's not, my story didn't go from assistant level to lead choreographer level, so there's an issue there. Management, tour director didn't go to Gaga herself and say, this is what's happening, or just didn't go to management, her management, and say, we have a situation. As far as I understand, because I imagine that if she had known, I would have imagined, especially back then, that there would have been a bigger conversation. And, never told my agents because I didn't want to make it a big deal. And so after everything, it's what it came down to. And there's a lot more layer and texture to this story that is just gonna be something I share in another video. This has been a big, heavy anvil of a burden and a shadow to just lurk for so long that if there was only one story to tell, to share, to move through the rest of my own healing process, this would be it. So, there it is. I'm going to leave it here and hope that this is a story used for resources so that people in all areas of their industry, especially dance, understand that leadership is not to be taken lightly. Leadership positions are they're not light. You carry a big burden. And when I was in a position of leadership, although at the assistant level, I took care of, I made sure that my people were taken care of. And that should just be baseline, right? That should just be baseline. So I hope that in sharing this, that people all across their positions all across, from the top to the bottom, that everyone understands what leadership means and what it entails, and the more difficult, how to handle more difficult situations, like health matters in particular, with grace and more delicacy and more honesty, more transparency. Man. All right. That's it for me. Until the next share, which there's more.